What does it mean to enjoy life while also trying to find the balance with your money? Like how do we find the balance of enjoying life, enjoying the money we have, experiencing life, but also preparing for our financial future? That's the question that we want to answer, and that's the question that I think a lot of people are asking in this world. So where do we start?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways you can go with that because it's like, it feels like, I don't know, maybe you can relate, maybe you can't, but it feels like almost every single week, at least monthly, right? You're buying something that you're like, man, did I really need that?
Yeah.
And, then you look back on it and you're like, okay, cool. We have more stuff that, the next time that I move, it's probably going to sit in a drawer. I'm going to find it and be like, why did I ever buy that? And then you end up throwing it away before you ever move, right? Because that's when you move everything. But yeah, I actually have a good example. Brought him today for a little show and tell. And literally this last week, my wife has been really into sourdough. I don't know. Have you ever done any
Yeah.
like sourdough stuff?
Yeah, we've dabbled in it. It was one of my, 6-month hobbies that I tried and then just never picked it up again. There's a starter sitting in my fridge that
Of
hasn't
course.
been fed in 6 months probably.
Yeah, so funny. My wife recently picked it up, and this was it was a few months ago. I think it was like Thanksgiving, so it was like 4 months ago. When she kind of started picking it up, but she's gotten into it, and she just came to me and she's like, "Hey, I want a couple things for my sourdough stuff." And I was like, "Do we really need it?" And she's like, "Well, no." But then she, kind of brought it up to me again, and we basically had like an Amazon gift card. So, I was like, what else? Do we need is there anything else that I can think of that I really need? And the answer was like, well, no, there's not. So anyways, I just bought these 3 things. She hasn't used them yet. I literally just unboxed them. I don't even know what they are. Like, this is one of them. It's like there's probably people watching that are like, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah, no idea.
It's like you put and then you shake it, I guess. I don't know. This was like, I think this thing is like made out of steel. It was like, I think it was like $20 because all 3 of these items. So, you come around that idea, not to talk about sourdough and stuff a whole bunch, but you get around that idea of like, do we really need this? You've been making sourdough without this for however long and it's been working just fine. So do you really need it?
Yeah, and where's the balance? Where is the balance in buying things and spending money on things that bring us enjoyment?
Yeah.
And answering that question. And I think that's something we'll never get to, a definitive answer on. I think that's something we will
Yeah.
wrestle with for as long as we're alive and bound by money. We'll be thinking about that balance. And so it's got me thinking, more, I guess, a little bit deeper into the psychological
Yeah.
aspect of it. Like, why do you think so many people feel guilty about spending money on themselves, even when it's something they can afford? Like,
I
and
wonder,
I'm not
if
saying
it's
that.
because people are stretched so thin that they're like, oh man, did I really need to spend money on that? Ooh, I probably shouldn't have. So, now I feel guilty because I spent money on something I didn't
Mm.
really need instead of, what would have been more responsible is, spending money on investing or something like that. And so you feel guilty because you spent money on something you didn't really need. And when you look back on it, you're like, oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I think, and this is just speaking from my experience, because, and you and I have joked about this before, but I am I can't keep a hobby for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
And so I will get excited about something for 6 months and move on from it. And so I have this like train wreck of experiences I can look back on where I'm like, well, I spent money on this and I spent money on that and I spent money on
Yeah, I
this.
remember you
And
told
then
me
like,
one time about the wine hobby that you had, right? During
yes,
like COVID
yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, I got into winemaking and had people buy me birthday and Christmas gifts around this
Oh,
stuff.
funny.
And now it's all just sitting in my attic and I haven't made wine in months. Or I remember like in college, I got super into disc golf and I was like, I'm going to buy this $300 disc golf like basket to sit
You
in my
still own it?
backyard. I still own it, but it hasn't been used in probably a
And
year and a half.
then you feel almost like guilty about either selling it or getting rid of it because you're like, oh, I might use it someday, right? And then you never
Yes.
do. So
Yes, but
weird.
that feeling from those other things causes me to then like at times feel guilt about wanting to buy more things, because it's like, am I going to really, is this just going to be another thing? Is
Yeah.
this going to be another thing that I give up on? And so, I think we have to take on some kind of a balanced mindset and realize, like, at some point in life, like, not to get super like philosophical or anything, but like there is a point when we realize that like our life is going to end one day. Like,
Yeah.
we are just, this is all a limited time. We do need to enjoy it. And there is an aspect of our finances that should be used to just do things that we want to do.
Totally.
But we have to figure out how to find the balance of, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes I feel like it's too polarized. I feel like
I
sometimes
like that. That's good.
it's either I save or I spend,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nobody really, helping people figure out a balanced approach to what that looks like. And so,
Yeah.
how can someone shift their mindset from that polarized mindset
Yes.
to a more balanced one?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we talk about this all the time, but the first thing that's coming to my mind is like, if you are really disciplined, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's almost a swear word for some people, but is a budget. Like,
Yeah.
literally budget for fun. Budget for fun. And then you don't feel guilty about it, right? So every month you set up your budget, whatever. If you literally put a line item in your budget that is whatever it is, $50, $100, $2,000, it's different for everybody, right? Because we're all in different contexts. Literally put in there a line item for your budget. And then you don't feel as guilty about it. Or for miscellaneous, like my wife and I, for example, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you're right. Like, because we do that, like in our budget, we have an individual right now as it stands. We probably should raise it a little bit because it's been the same since we've gotten married 3 years ago. But it's $100 for each of us. It literally, the line items say Dylan fund money, Katie fund money. And then we also have a $100 miscellaneous, tier. The issue kind of where I've struggled with this at times is sometimes there are expenses that are larger than that like are not necessarily like fun or anything like that, but and one I'm thinking of is something you and I've talked about off camera, but is my recent kind of investment into some home gym equipment, right? Like, that's a debate that my wife and I were having, was like, does this count as fun money, or is this not fun money? And how do we plan for things like that? There was no way for me to like outfit a home gym for, what I spent on my 1 month, $100. I could have saved for 6 or 7 months probably and paid for it. And so like, that's where I've struggled, is how do we find that, like, for larger expense purposes, even like trips and vacations and stuff, like beyond that, how do we do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the first thing that comes to my mind is like, if you have, this is literally what my wife does, and I can't make this up. She will, so, typically our parents will give us cash or something like that for our Christmas and birthdays and things like that. It'll just give us kind of a lump sum of cash, but she will literally stockpile money away. And then she's like, hey, I've been saving. I'm not making this up. She will stockpile money away. And she's like, hey, and it'll be like 3, 4, 5 months later or something. And she comes to me and she goes, hey, I have been saving this money for something that I've wanted to buy. The money's, I'm like, where'd you get the money? Because like I handle all the finances in our family.
Yeah.
So, and she hasn't got a freaking clue about it, which, whatever, it works for us. Okay. But I see all the money coming in and out, and what she's spending money on. And then all of a sudden she's like, hey, I have $600 for this. I've been saving. I'm like, where are you saving this money from? So that's, I guess that's one approach that I wouldn't necessarily employ. The other thing that kind of comes to mind is like, hey, if you don't spend that, in your case, $100 a month, then all of a sudden now the next month is 200. So this is actually what we call, there's a word for this, saving. Have you ever, I don't know, maybe you've heard that word before.
Yeah.
So some people haven't.
Yeah, that's a tough one sometimes. And I guess like ultimately, what I'm trying to get at too is like, how do we delineate between like spending on things that truly add value
Yeah.
and spending on impulsive purchases? Like
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about impulse buying,
Mm-hmm.
in our time here with Money Mavs. But like there are times when spending money on an experience that or an item that truly
Mm-hmm.
brings value to our lives is not necessarily an impulse decision. And that's,
Right.
again, of course I see it this way because I'm the one who bought it. But like that's how I felt about
Yeah.
gym equipment. Like it felt like this something that was a real value add to my life and not something I was just doing for fun. I don't even really
Mm-hmm.
love working out. And so how do we find that balance? How do we, budget for that enjoyment without like sabotaging our future as well? Because that was one of the fears my wife had, and you know, rightfully so. Like when she heard I wanted to spend this money on this gym equipment, like her initial response was like, well, for 6 months, like you've been saying that we need to save, we need to save, we need to save, we need to do this. Like we have these long-term goals. And then here you are like wanting to spend $700. I like, it doesn't add up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, and then how do you not feel guilty about, dropping $700? I mean, I guess I would pose the question back to you. Like, why did you spend $700? Was it an impulse buy? I mean, you tell me.
I mean, like ultimately, like the decision to buy the specific item that I bought was kind of impulsive for sure. The specific equipment that I bought, but I had been thinking for, months about wanting to invest in home gym equipment. And I guess the answer there is that like, if that was true, I could have begun saving for that back at that
Exactly.
original moment of desire
Yeah.
and then begun saving for that rather than just kind of like passively waiting for a time to make a purchase.
That's
And
exactly it.
so, yeah, um,
And then
yeah,
and then
that's
honest, like you know what the beauty of that is, of saving for something that's $700. And as soon as you have the idea, like, hey, I'm gonna start saving for something that I want right now, and it's $700, and so I'm gonna start saving now. As you are saving, you're processing, do I really want this or not? And by the time you have $700, maybe you still want it and you buy it, or maybe you don't want it and then you go and spend it on something else. I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents.
yeah. No, I mean that's really good. And that waiting, like that saving I guess that saving process, that month, waiting will really help you, as you said, kind of figure out what is most, like if
Mm-hmm.
you have that initial moment of desire and you commit and say, all right, I'm going to spend the next 6 months saving up for this. I'll buy it at 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Your desires might change at the end of that 6 months, and you may not even no longer desire that thing anymore. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a good practical roadblock to put in place for those larger purchases that in the moment, we may think that it would add value to our life and we want to just jump on it. Don't impulsively jump on it. Set a plan in place
Yes.
to begin saving for that and then see how you feel once you hit that target. Do I still
Yeah.
want this or do I
Yeah.
not?
It
And I
does
think
two
that
things for
applies.
you. It does two things for you. Number one, it forces you to not impulse buy. And number two, it also makes it so you don't feel guilty when you do buy, or if you do end up buying it. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
And if you don't end up buying it, hey, guess what? You got $700 to go put in a savings account or investment account or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great spot to just kind of wrap up this conversation. I think we set some clear just ways to, as we've talked about with a lot of financial issues, like a lot of things are not necessarily black and white. They're a little bit
Yeah.
gray. We've got to
Yeah.
figure
I
out
like that.
this kind of middle ground at times. And I think we've processed through that. And so we would love, to just continue this conversation with you. Maybe I'm sure this is an issue that any of you listening to have probably wrestled with, had questions about. And that's why we want to start this community. We don't want you to just listen to us talk. We want to
Be in a conversation with you.
Be in a conversation with you. So we've got our Discord server. Give us a comment on the video. Follow us on TikTok, all the other places as well, and just come be a part of it.